The rain was a relentless, weeping curtain, blurring the neon glow of the city into a smeared watercolor. Seong Gi-hun, a man etched with the grim lines of failure, hunched deeper into his threadbare coat, the chill seeping into his bones far more profoundly than the damp air. His life, once a vibrant tapestry, was now a frayed, tattered mess of crushing debt, fractured relationships, and a pervasive, suffocating despair. His son's birthday was tomorrow, and the weight of his inadequacy pressed down on him like a physical burden. He was supposed to be the provider, the protector, but he felt like a hollow shell of a man. His mother, a woman whose love was a steadfast beacon in his storm-tossed life, had managed to scrounge together a small sum of money, a pitiful offering yet a profound expression of her unwavering belief in him. It was supposed to be for a cake, for a modest celebration, a meager attempt to infuse a little joy into his son's special day. But the demon of desperation, the gnawing hunger for escape, had seized control of his better judgment. He saw it not as a token of love, but as a ticket, a chance, however slim, to claw his way out of the abyss he had dug for himself. The buzzing lights of the racetrack cast long, distorted shadows that danced like phantoms across the rain-slicked asphalt. The air was heavy, thick with the stench of wet concrete and the cloying scent of cheap cigarettes. The crowd, a mass of restless energy and frenzied hope, surged around him, their collective breath a palpable force. Seong, his heart hammering a frantic rhythm against his ribs, gambled away his mother's money, his eyes fixed on the spinning wheel as if his salvation lay within its capricious turns. The clatter of the ball, the murmur of the crowd, all faded into a dull roar, leaving only the frantic hope that pulsed through his veins. For a fleeting moment, luck seemed to smile upon him. The numbers aligned, the wheel stopped in his favor, and he was momentarily bathed in the blinding light of victory. 4 million won, a sum that could have paid off a significant portion of his debts, a lifeline tossed into the churning waters of his despair, was his. The crowd's roar, usually an oppressive sound, now filled him with a fleeting euphoria, a feeling that he hadn't felt in years. But the euphoria was short-lived, a flickering candle in a hurricane. The gnawing pit of anxiety, which he had briefly managed to quiet, began to rumble to life again. He clutched the money tightly in his hand, a tangible representation of hope and a stark reminder of his desperate situation, and hurried out of the track. The rain had intensified, and the city seemed to hold its breath in anticipation of some unknown event. He was close to home when his world tilted on its axis, the illusion of a possible escape shattering around him like glass. A group of menacing figures, their faces hidden in the shadows, emerged from a dark, narrow alleyway, their boots echoing like gunshots on the wet pavement. They were the debt collectors, vultures drawn to the scent of weakness. The beating was brutal, a flurry of fists and boots that seemed to tear at his very soul, his body a canvas for their rage. The shadows danced around them, twisting into grotesque, monstrous forms under the pale moonlight, amplifying the horror of the attack. He was reduced to a whimpering, bloody heap on the ground, each blow stealing another breath, and each pain a reminder of his failure as a man, as a provider, as a son. He was a man on the verge of crumbling to dust. When he frantically reached for his winnings, he found his pockets were empty. A jolt of panic mixed with a chilling memory raced through his mind. During his frantic escape, he had collided with a young woman, her eyes wide with startled surprise, and the realization settled upon him like a cold, clammy hand. She must have stolen his money. They gave him 1 month to repay the debt, a period that felt both infinitely long and terrifyingly short. His despair became a palpable thing, a suffocating blanket that weighed down on him, making it difficult to breathe, to function, to even think. He took his son out for a meager meal, a sad attempt to fulfill his promise, to create a semblance of normalcy in their fractured world. The diner was a dingy, depressing place, the fluorescent lights casting a harsh, unflattering glow on their tired faces. The hum of dying lights and the bitter taste of failure hung in the air, thick and cloying like smoke, as he watched his son consume his food with a quiet resignation. He was not a father. He was nothing. He slumped at the train station, a monument to defeat, waiting for the train that would take him to another dead-end job. He looked around the station, with its bustling crowd and the constant hum of movement, a stark contrast to the desolation that was his existence. It was there, amidst the cacophony of the station, that a strange encounter took place. A sharply dressed man, his suit immaculate despite the downpour, approached him with an unsettling calmness, his gaze unnervingly piercing. The man's smile was unsettling, a mask of hidden malice, a predator's grin. He proposed a simple game, a childish slap game, with a sinister twist. If Seong won, he would receive 100,000 won, a tempting sum for a man in his condition. If he lost, the price was humiliation and pain. The sound of skin against skin reverberated through the station, each slap echoing in the silence of Seong's heart. He was beaten repeatedly, his cries swallowed by the oppressive hum of the station, his body a canvas for the stranger's casual cruelty. He wanted to stop, to give up, but the promise of the money and the desperate need for a way out spurred him on. Finally, miraculously, he won. The man, his eyes devoid of emotion, handed him a business card with a mysterious number, the card feeling unnaturally cold, as if it held some strange, unknown power of its own. This was his only hope. His mother's health was rapidly deteriorating, her frail body struggling under the weight of age and illness, and his estranged wife was making plans to take their daughter to the United States, effectively cutting him off from the last vestiges of his family. The need for money became an all-consuming fire, burning away all reason and logic. He was a man trapped in a cage of his own making, and the only way out was to gamble again, to take a chance on the unknown. Consumed by desperation, he dialed the number on the card, his hand trembling as the phone rang, a beacon of morbid hope in the vast, lonely landscape of his life. A nondescript van, its windows tinted a dark, impenetrable black, arrived to collect him. The interior was eerily sterile, like a waiting room in a hospital, a place where hope went to die. The air was thick with a strange, chemical scent. He felt a strange sense of foreboding wash over him, as if he was stepping into the unknown. He barely had time to think before a strange gas hissed from hidden vents, and the world dissolved into blackness. He awoke in a cavernous facility, the air heavy with the metallic tang of blood and disinfectant, the sterile smell of a place where death and pain were commonplace. He was surrounded by hundreds of other people, 455 to be exact, all dressed in identical green tracksuits, their faces pale with fear and confusion, their eyes wide with terror. The guards, faceless figures in pink uniforms, moved with an unsettling precision, their silence more menacing than any shout. The sheer scale of the operation and the robotic movements of the guards made the whole situation feel unreal, as if he had stepped into a bizarre nightmare. He did not understand where he was or what he was doing here, and the fear began to take root in the deepest part of his soul. A game, or what they were told was a game, commenced in an expansive field that looked unnaturally pristine under an overcast sky. A massive doll, its eyes black and soulless, its smile an eerie caricature of innocence, towered over them. The rules were simple. Move when the doll sang, stop when it stopped. It was a children's game, yet here it felt ominous, the childish nature of it only adding to the sense of foreboding. It was a twisted parody of everything that was normal, a mockery of fun and play. The first disqualification was a brutal awakening. The doll's eyes glowed a malevolent red, and a sharp, sickening crack echoed through the field. A man, just moments before full of life and fear, crumpled to the ground, blood pooling around his lifeless body, a gruesome testament to the true nature of the game. Panic spread like wildfire, screams piercing the air as players scrambled for safety, only to be gunned down by unseen snipers. The pristine field, moments ago so tranquil, was now slick with blood, the ground beneath their feet a grotesque battlefield, the air heavy with the stench of death and gunpowder. It was a slaughterhouse, a place where life was cheap and pain was abundant. Seong, frozen with terror, barely made it through, his heart a frantic drum against his ribs, his mind struggling to comprehend the sheer brutality and senselessness of what he had just witnessed. Of the original 456 players, only 255 remained, the others lying scattered across the field, a testament to the game's terrifying reality. They were not here to play, they were here to die. Back in the dormitory, a massive piggy bank, suspended above them, slowly filled with money, its obscene display of wealth, a cruel reminder of the desperation that had brought them all here. The remaining players were given a choice: continue the games or leave. Most, desperate and broken, voted to end the nightmare, their minds and bodies overwhelmed by the trauma and the violence they had experienced. But for Seong, the horrors were far from over. He had tasted the depths of despair, he had been to the edge of his sanity. and he knew, deep in his heart, that he had no other option. He returned home, only to find his mother's condition had worsened, and his debts had become even more insurmountable. The dark pull of the games became irresistible, the lure of the prize money, a siren call to his troubled soul. He called the number again, his resolve steeled by a mix of desperation, a growing sense of inevitability, and a twisted desire for revenge. He had seen the worst that they could offer, and he felt a strange sense of defiance grow inside of him. This time, he and the other remaining players were transported to a remote island, its jagged cliffs and stormy skies a fitting backdrop for the horrors to come. The air was heavy with a smell of salt and the promise of more bloodshed, the foreboding palpable. They were herded into a new round of games, the sterile walls of the facility hiding unspeakable secrets, the guards' inhuman precision deepening the sense of dread. This was not just a game. This was a twisted descent into the heart of darkness. The second game was a test of patience and skill, a cruel parody of childhood innocence. They were tasked with carving shapes from delicate sugar molds, the task deceptively simple, but the consequences of failure deadly. The air was thick with the acrid scent of burnt sugar and the metallic tang of blood, the sound of gunfire punctuating the tense silence. Seong's hands trembled as he worked, his mind racing, the memory of the previous game's brutality still fresh in his mind. He knew that one wrong move could be his last. He had to survive. He had to make it out. He survived again, by some miracle, but each day became harder and harder to face. As the games progressed, the facility descended into chaos. The nights were a battlefield, the players turning on each other in savage acts of survival, their humanity eroding with each passing moment. They were no longer people. They were reduced to a base instinct, the need to live, to make it another day. The guards orchestrated the carnage with cold, clinical efficiency, their indifference adding another layer of horror to the experience. The dormitory became a slaughterhouse, the air thick with the stench of death and fear, the constant reminder of the high cost of survival. Seong formed uneasy alliances, but trust was a fleeting luxury in this place, a dangerous commodity that could be turned against you at any moment. He was constantly aware that survival here was a selfish act, and that the people he trusted could be the end of him. Every day, every game, was a test of will, a psychological war in which the true enemy was not the guards, but the desperation and the fear that consumed them all. Each game stripped away another layer of their humanity, leaving only a primal need to survive, turning them into savage versions of themselves. The players were not merely pawns in a grotesque spectacle. They were a source of twisted entertainment for unseen benefactors, their suffering a carefully orchestrated show, designed to amuse, to horrify, and to dehumanize. He understood that this place was a twisted entertainment. It was a game to entertain the rich. Seong knew this, but he couldn't do anything. He could only survive, for as long as he could. The facility itself was a living nightmare, its sterile facade hiding a heart of pure malevolence. The games were not just a fight for money. They were a descent into the abyss, where humanity was stripped away layer by layer. Seong, battered, haunted, and on the brink of despair, clung to a flicker of hope. The memory of his son's face, his sole motivation, a desperate plea against the darkness that threatened to consume him. But the cost of survival was steep, a price paid in blood, in tears, and in the erosion of his very soul. The games were not simply a test of physical prowess. They were a test of the human spirit, a grim reminder of what people would do for a chance to survive, to win, to escape. Seong did not know if he could make it through, but one thing was clear: he would not give up. He would not let his desperation be the end of him. He had to survive. He had to make it to the end. He was a man teetering on the edge of oblivion, the games a cruel mirror reflecting the worst aspects of humanity. He was no longer Seong Gi-hun, the man with a life filled with struggles. He was now a player, a number in a macabre dance of survival, a pawn in a game where the stakes were his life, his very soul. And he would not lose, even if it was the last thing he ever did. He was beginning to understand the full extent of the twisted depravity that lay at the heart of the game, and he had to fight back, not just for himself, but for the memory of his mother, for the future of his son, for the hope that humanity could somehow be more than this. But he would continue to play, even if it meant losing all that was left of him. He would fight against the madness, against the tide of dehumanization. He would fight for his right to live, for his right to make a better future for his son. to be the father he knew he could be, even if it meant walking on a path paved with blood and despair. The following days continued to blur in an endless cycle of games, brutal betrayals, and desperate struggles for survival. He saw people he had come to know as friends die horrible, meaningless deaths. He saw the true darkness that lay beneath the surface of humanity and how easily people could become monsters. But through it all, he continued to fight, to survive, to hope. He had to. He must. He formed shaky alliances, knowing that each one could be his downfall. He learned to read people, to see the desperation in their eyes, and to trust only when he had to. He learned to fight, not with brute force, but with cunning, with strategy, and with the desperate will to survive. Each time he thought he was reaching the end, he discovered that there was another game, another cruel test of his resolve. His body was bruised, his mind was scarred, and his soul was tattered, but he still held onto the tiny flame of hope that burned within him. He would not break. He would not give in. He would make it to the end. He knew that the games were designed to break him, to destroy him, to turn him into one of the monsters that surrounded him. But he would not let it. He would not let them take his humanity. He would fight for it with everything that he had, even if it meant dying in the process. His was a battle not just for survival, but for his own soul. And so he continued, a ghost in a land of nightmares, and the games continued, and more people continued to die. But Seong fought on, driven by an almost superhuman will, and the tiny flame of hope that he held close to his heart. He knew that he was walking a path of despair, but he also knew that he could not give up. Not now, not ever. He had come too far to turn back. His story was a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, and a reminder that even in the darkest of places, hope can still be found. His journey was a cruel and brutal one, but he would continue to fight for his chance, his hope, his life. And that's all he could do.